This is the frequency of total oneness or integration. Those who vibrate to this frequency are merged in identity and become a mass-conscious whole. They magnetize those in other frequencies and provide the current for the natural flow toward integration. Once the seventh density beings reach critical mass, they will progress through the prism of Lyra. From our point of view, it will then be a black hole exit point and reach the next octave, where another adventure awaits. It is important to note that as portions of the whole fragmented through the prism of Lyra, each consciousness retained awareness on all density levels. However, part of the forgetfulness remained. From most highly focused density levels, such as third and portions of fourth, an unawareness may occur concerning the coexistence of other levels. As integration occurs, one becomes aware of these other aspects. The microcosm always reflects the macrocosm. This is visible in the coincidence of how atomic structure mirrors the structure of a solar system. It is the same with the fragmentation of portions of the whole into individual beings or soul groups. When one incarnates into a physical body, it can be likened to a mini-passage through the prism of Lyra. The process of soul fragmentation as one incarnates physically can be likened somewhat to Freud's id, ego, and superego theories. As a fetus, the soul demonstrates a first density consciousness. At that point, one is aware of itself as intricately connected to the environment. Physically, one is a mass of DNA codes with the potential to become a conscious human being. Since Freud did not take his hypothesis into prenatal development, there is no correlation. If he were to have created a label that described the fetu's relationship to its environment, then it would have been a first density description. When the child is between birth and 2 years old, he/she begins to demonstrate second density consciousness. As separation begins to be perceived between itself and the environment and its desires become externalized. There is still somewhat of an egocentric point of view, which correlates this developmental level with the id. What distinguishes a child's second density orientation from third density is the lack of a distinct ability to differentiate between itself and the environment. From approximately the second year of life onward, third density consciousness becomes the primary framework demonstrated. This is the development of the ego and the awareness of the child as a separate individual. These are crucial formative years. One can see that if development is disrupted, such as through abuse, the personality can fragment and perhaps create dysfunction later in life. Many individuals retain this third density consciousness orientation of ego throughout their entire lives. The development of the superego, or higher awareness, is a typical fourth density trait. Humans have the option to develop this aspect of themselves. This is a reintegration of the fragmentation of personality that occurs through the birth process, as well as integration on a spiritual level. As the human race begins to move more solidly into fourth density consciousness, it is suspected that this personality fragmentation process will become less apparent, and perhaps children will begin displaying fourth density characteristics earlier in their development and retain them throughout their lives. In childhood one must learn how to adapt and integrate into a workable framework. If one cannot do this, such as in the instance of child abuse, psychological disorders will very often be displayed when adulthood is reached. Pathologies such as multiple personality disorder can occur because the natural third density personality integration process did not occur during childhood. Some extraterrestrial civilizations have learned to detect and transmute the seeds of pathological disorders during childhood, and therefore have no incidence of adult pathologies. If it is understood that no matter how far an individual fragments, either on a soul level or in the personality, and that the way back home is always through integration, he/she will never lose sight of the goal. In this case, we can go home again. 2. Creation of a galactic family. I am Ra, from whom time began. I am the hub of a wheel, a day star hovering over an endless sea. I am not the harvest. I am the seed. I am not the lyre. I am the song. I will not pass away. Egyptian Book of the Dead, Lyran Translation. In passing through the prism of Lyra, the first fragmentation created a group of beings that can be called the Founders. Once one other terms such as the Watchers, the Eternals, the Reflectors, and the Seeders have been used by other individuals and are equally appropriate. The Founders embodied the group consciousness of what eventually became humankind. They can project to a very high level of fourth density, but their natural state is non-physical. In splitting off from the portion of the whole that passed through the prism of Lyra, they still retain the memory, if somewhat dreamlike, of the idea of integration and the purpose of the fragmentation. It is they who orchestrate humankind's evolution. They play the roles of the parent archetype, in male and female polarity balance. The Founders became aware of the blueprint that was chosen as they fragmented from the whole. From this blueprint they knew that children carry the encodings of the parents. Since they played the parent's role, it was their responsibility to influence the growth of the new consciousness about to be created. In doing this they became the blueprint, began to understand and live it, knowing that this would encode future fragments. The founders began to understand the natural energy patterns of the polarized reality just created. It became obvious to them that the newly fragmented group consciousness interfaces with specific realities, that is densities, within three main points. 1. A point of pure positivity. 2. A point of pure negativity. 3. The integrative point of the two. All interactions occur within the lines that connect each point, with very few aspects of consciousness existing within the points of purity. This realization inspired them to understand a paradigm of polarized reality, which was something exciting and new to their understanding. The paradigm, as it emerged for them, is shown below in the two-dimensional diagram. Both negative and positive polarities moving toward integration. As they pondered the paradigm, they began to understand the mechanics of how the fragmented consciousness would once again merge back through the prism of Lyra. The linear model above can be changed to bring about the triadic relationship of the template. This triad represents the probabilities of the integrative process. Civilizations naturally move randomly according to the laws of chaos within the triadic template until a balance of energy is reached. If a civilization or consciousness chooses integration, the willingness to grow from both polarities, they will naturally move toward the integrative point, fueled by the momentum of both polarities. This can be viewed as an allowing form of integration. If, on the other hand, a civilization or individual refuses integration, the template expands to accommodate their denial of the opposite polarity. The expanded templates will not be outlined here at the present time. When they believed they were ready, the founders began another fragmentation. Just as a portion of the whole became curious and created this realm from its thoughts, the founders emulated their parents and exerted thought energy to create a fragmentation of themselves. This fragmentation occurred far and wide. Individualized consciousness sprang from the founders' group awareness and began to explore the universe. Because of this fragmentation, every being existing in the galactic family presented here is part of the founders. There are an infinite number of fragments and explorational journeys. Some of these fragments grew into civilizations that have played a part in the development of Earth. Some of those who have a reference point in Earth's known reality will be explored in the chapters ahead. When the founders fragmented, some allowed their energy to densify sufficiently in order to enter a physical reality. The founders had already chosen planets that could support humanoid life. Then they gently guided these fragments into a physical, third or fourth density existence. After time had passed, the fragments became more accustomed to physical existence, and assistance from the founders, who still existed in smaller numbers, became less needed. The first area to be eventually colonized after the founders' fragmentation was in the general vicinity of the Lyra constellation. Most of the galactic family that has genetic connections to Earth has roots in the Lyran system. It was there that the first attempt at integration occurred. The founders thought that it would be easy and predictable. Instead, humanoid life forms spread outward exponentially until a very intricate tapestry was woven. The threads of the tapestry began to become tangled until eventually the origins of the thread became lost in the colorful maze of the tapestry's design. The following are the main characters displayed in this tapestry from the perspective of Earth, Lyra. The general area of the birth of the humanoid race. All humanoid races in our galactic family have genetic roots connected to Lyra. It is the symbolic harp upon which the song of humanity is played. Vega. A star within the constellation of Lyra. Descendants of Lyra, Vega birthed a race of beings who manifested Lyra's opposite polarity both in their beliefs and actions. There were frequent conflicts between the Lyran and Vegan races. Apex Planet. A planet within the Lyran system which was the first attempt at creating an integrated society. Sirius. A trinary star group, it is known in Earth mythology as the Dog Star. Sirius was one of the first areas to be colonized by beings from the Lyran star group. Sirius embodied the energy of the triadic template and perpetuated the drive toward integration. There is a large variety of consciousness types that incarnate in this system. Orion. This is the main battleground for the challenge of polarity integration, seeded from Sirius as well as Lyra and Vega. There is a direct connection with Earth, as explored in later chapters. Orion. Pleiades. Colonized by Lyran offshoots. This group is Earth's main genetic connection from extraterrestrial sources. Arcturus. An archetype or future self-ideal of Earth, Arcturus assists in healing personal and planetary consciousness. Its vibration, primarily sixth density, has been attributed to the angelic kingdom. Zeta Reticuli. This civilization is intimately connected with Earth. The Reticuli are the primary group instigating abductions, or more accurately called temporary detainments, since this group always returns the abductee. More will be said about this group in later chapters. Though some of these civilizations overlap each other in time and may not appear linear, below is a linear translation of the progression of various cultures in comparison to each other. Discussion. Once one recovers from the initial shock of the idea that extraterrestrials had something to do with Earth's heritage, it really seems like a very logical explanation. Why would the human race egotistically believe that it alone is responsible for Earth's genetic past? Upon Earth, races have discovered new races and have begun integrating with them. Perhaps before this occurred, these races never knew the others existed. This model can hold true for the universe as well as planet Earth. How many more ancient drawings of rocket ships and their pilots need to be found before humans can break through the fears about discovering Earth's past? The most obvious question is this: if the extraterrestrials are out there, why don't they show themselves? An answer can be found in humanity's approach to anthropological studies upon Earth. Scientists do not go marching right into a primitive culture waving their cameras and equipment. These types of cultural assimilations sometimes take them decades to accomplish. In its own eyes, humanity may seem civilized enough. However, to a race that has achieved space travel and perhaps even global unity, humanity may seem primitive indeed. Perhaps they are waiting, hiding in the bushes, allowing only a few humans to see them until the signal goes out to the whole of society that they are not a threat. What if the signal that they are there never goes out to society? What if humanity continues to ignore the evidence, hoping it will all go away? To many of the extraterrestrials, this seems to be the case. All non-threatening methods seem to have been unsuccessful thus far. The primary game plan over the last few decades appears to be much more profound in its potential to awaken humanity. What if humanity continues to ignore the evidence? The primary game plan over the last few decades appears to be much more profound in its potential to awaken humanity. What if humanity continues to ignore the evidence, hoping it will all go away? To many of the extraterrestrials, this seems to be the case.